During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing, alone on horseback, through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy House of Usher. I know not how it was, but with the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half-pleasurable because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually received even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible. I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul which I could compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after-dream of the reveler upon opium. The bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime. What was it, I paused to think, what was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher? It was a mystery all insoluble, nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. I was forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that while beyond doubt there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. It was possible, I reflected, that a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify or perhaps to annihilate its capacity for sorrowful impression, and acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling, and gazed down, but with a shudder even more thrilling than before, upon the remodeled and inverted images of the gray sedge, and the ghastly tree stems, and the vacant, eye-like windows. We are officially recording a podcast.
A podcast.
And we're done. Thank you, everybody. We're not going to get any better than that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we covered Spirits of the Dead.
We did.
Oh, wait. First, I'm going to do something amazing.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And it's Del Toro time.
It's Del Toro time.
Yeah. Because I just realized that we have not introduced this show for a few episodes.
No, we haven't.
I've been going back over our episodes and uploading them to the YouTube channel, and the last few we just never got around to it, which was fine because it meant I never had to actually put in the new theme music, but whatever. Here we are. So we watched Spirits of the Dead years ago. I remember watching it at your mom's house. Mm-hmm. We watched it, and it was 3 Edgar Allan Poe stories. We talked a bit about Poe.
We talked a bit about Poe during another episode, Dad.
And which one was that?
The Raven.
We also talked about Poe during The Raven. Mm-hmm. So we've covered Poe.
We have.
We covered The Raven. We covered William Wilson. Mm-hmm. We covered Merzinstergeist, whatever that story was called, and don't drive a race car into over a gulch, or a wire will cut your head off.
The devil one. The
devil will take your head, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good story.
That was a good story. That was a fun movie. I enjoyed that. But now we are actually discussing an Edgar Allan Poe story proper.
Proper Poe.
Go for it. Go. You finish your joke.
There's no
you set
joke.
it up. It's teed
No
up.
joke.
It's on the little T-ball stand.
It's a swing and a miss.
The only kid to swing and a miss at T-ball. That's a lie. I had friends who played T-ball when I was a kid, and you'd be surprised at the number of misses there were on that old tee. It also counts as a miss if you hit the tee. So
Maybe we would have found out I needed glasses earlier if I had played T-ball.
there was a variant on T-ball where the ball is actually connected to the tee with a tether, which makes it's like so the ball can only go so far. And I remember when like the little kids would play that. I never played sports. I just enjoyed them vicariously. Anyway, Edgar Allan Poe married a 13-year-old girl when he was 26. Edgar Allan Poe
Died.
When she died, he was sad. And it sort of colored the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he died.
Poe. And then he died.
Mysteriously.
And that colored all of our lives.
Yeah.
Baltimore boy. The only people think of Edgar Allan Poe. I was just thinking of this. So the famous photo of Edgar Allan Poe, I'm looking at it right now. He looks like he's constructed out of mashed potatoes and somebody put a mustache on him. The photo of Edgar Allan Poe, that was taken the year he died. So like he was in a rough place.
Yeah.
And he was young. Like Edgar Allan Poe, how old was he when he died? 40. He was 40. He looks like he could be my dad right now. But there's another photo of Edgar Allan Poe.
The Edgar Allan Poe.
Or not a photo. There's like a drawing of Edgar Allan Poe. I can't remember what it was. I saw it. Now I can't find it. In any case, that photo we have of him is not. It's kind of like the painting of William Shakespeare that we think, oh, that's what William Shakespeare looked like. But like that picture of William Shakespeare was painted like after his death, and it was based on like a description of him. And this photo of Poe is taken at the year of his death. I just want to, I don't know where I'm going with this. I just want to point out that he was not just this like disheveled man.
Yeah.
He had like a life and a career. His heart was broken when his child bride died. And he wrote a lot and was just sort of an unhappy, unsatisfied guy. But also apparently he like, I think he got some like action. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
He wasn't some recluse. I think in popular culture, Edgar Allan Poe was always portrayed as like a creepy recluse or like, just kind of like this sort of dark, disturbed individual. But he was like a businessman. He edited magazines. He wrote reviews of books and plays and stuff. Like he was a guy. I don't know. I don't know why I'm standing up for Edgar Allan Poe's legacy. He's famous enough.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Poe.
Oh.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Every time. You are not the only one who's done that to me this week.
Poe. There've been a lot of movies made about like, what if Edgar Allan Poe was a detective and he solved crimes based on his stories? Like, there's been like more than one movie about that.
Why?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I've been reading a book, one of the many books that are like, what if Sherlock Holmes and the Cthulhu universe were like crossed over? And it's a well-written book, but it also just ends up being like, as soon as Cthulhu enters Sherlock Holmes, there's no more mysteries to solve. It's just Sherlock Holmes running around trying to stop like elder gods from entering our universe. And then it just becomes he's just an adventurer. As soon as Edgar Allan Poe becomes a detective, he just kind of stops being Edgar Allan Poe.
Yep.
Which is he's a writer. He's a writer guy, and we are discussing one of his stories. Which story?
The Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah. So this is a gothic horror story.
That it is.
You know a thing or two about the gothic.
That I do.
How come?
Because I took a gothic literature class. And also I just really, really love the gothic genre.
What is it you like about the gothic genre?
I don't know. I think it's just a lot of it is the sort of consistent symbology and like themes.
Uh-huh.
I like the cliches of the gothic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the houses. I like that so much of the story is all about this like big winding house of horror.
Yeah.
Because I like when architecture reflects the characters.
Right.
In literature and in other stories and stuff.
Would you say that in this story, the architecture reflects the character?
Well, I'd have to think about it a little bit.
It's the most, like... What I love about this story, and I love The Fall of the House of Usher, is Poe is able to somehow be the most blatant, obvious writer in the world while also being the most dense and obscure writer. Like, he can... The story is very, like, obvious, but each sentence in this story contains, like, 7 metaphors, a bunch of double entendres, some poetic, like sort of metaphysical, supernatural. I mean, like, there are sentences in this. It's a very short story. There are sentences in the story I had to read like 3 times just to be like, okay, what is he getting at here? Oh, I see. He's couching this in all kinds of like terms because this is a short story, but it's about 4 times as long as it actually is because he's just packed it full of hidden meanings.
There's a dragon fight in this story.
There's a dragon. There are 2. Let's take a moment to read another story in this story. A whole ass poem that Poe had written before and published before and was like, well, nobody liked my poem. No one appreciated my poem. I'm going to put it in this story so more people can read my poem. And then a intentionally bad, like, Arthurian romance that is a hilarious, like, send-up of that genre in the middle of a fairly somber short story about death and maybe incest.
I love this story.
Yes. What is it you love specifically about this story?
I like the ending.
Uh-huh.
But I like the fact that the narrator was Usher's, like, best friend when they were kids and didn't know he had a twin sister. I like that.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about our narrator's social life.
Yeah. And I liked the part with all of the glowing smoke where the narrator's like, no, it's fine. It's not an uncommon phenomenon.
Yeah, there is a whole, like, fan theory about this story that the House of Usher was actually being poisoned by radon gas.
Oh.
Which was a thing that happened. Like, you dig too deep, you encounter radium or whatever, and radon or whatever creates radon gas, and it glows. There's like a glow, and it poisons people in houses. Like, Poe had no idea about that because no one had discovered this yet. But I guess, like, houses with subterranean vaults and chambers, that was a problem. Like, people would get poisoned. So,
I mean, if it's generation after generation dying in this house, maybe the house is the problem.
Do you mean the house or the house? Because guess what? House means 2 things in this story. I was explaining the story to Mitzi, and I was like, so you see, it refers to the House of Usher, like the actual house, but also the House of Usher. Like, she's like, I get it, Dad. She's 11, and she's like, yeah, I picked up on that. Yeah, because the story is about a literal house that falls down, but also the end of the Usher line.
Yeah.
And how the 2 are tied together, inextricably bound up to each other, this terrible house, this terrible family. And this poor narrator who may as well not even be there.
Honestly.
He does nothing in this story except
read.
Read a bad story. So yeah, so what long and short, what happens in this story? It's fairly straightforward.
He goes to the house. He's like, "Wow, dude, you look terrible," to Usher.
Yeah,
Usher's
Roderick
like,
Usher.
Usher's like, I'm pretty sure my sister's dying. He's like, oh, okay. Then his sister dies in quotation marks. They bury her in the basement because Usher is like, I don't want her body taken for, what is it, experimentation or whatever?
Yeah, he's afraid of grave robbers.
And so they bury her. Usher's freaking out, and he's like, I think we might have buried her alive. And then she pops up. He dies. The house collapses.
The narrator gets out.
The narrator gets out, yeah.
Yeah. The unnamed narrator. That's why we're not actually saying his name. Unnamed narrator. That's it. Like, that's basically the story. But of course, it's so much more than that. There are the fungus growing on the house might be alive. It is located on a tarn, which is a kind of like a lakey swamp. So it's kind of a moat that surrounds this house, but it's a gross moat. There is a servant. We never find out what happens to the servant, who like lets people in. Roderick
probably died, I'm gonna imagine.
Yeah, Roderick Usher has hypersensitivity to all, like, his senses are so tuned up that like loud noises or like too tasty of foods, just he can't stand anything. He can't stand the feel of like the clothes he wears. So he can really,
I feel that.
Yeah.
Like,
Roderick Usher's not doing well.
No, when I have sensory overload, man, do I feel that.
But his sister's doing worse.
His sister is doing worse.
She's confined to bed. Nobody knows what's wrong with her.
They think it's, what do they think it is?
Catalepsy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah, catalepsy is when you go into like a cataleptic state. So you're like kind of in a trance, kind of in a coma.
Catalepsy just sounds like a made up word.
It means that you turn into a cat. No, so she has catalepsy, and no one really knows why. But that doesn't matter because the Usher family might be cursed anyway. One of the big points that our narrator makes is he's like, wow, after Roderick Usher contacted me, I kind of looked into this family, and their family tree is just a straight line.
Yeah.
Which could mean any number of things. It could mean that like it just any branches die off like really fast. But it could also mean that brother and sister are the only people who reproduce in this family line. So
which is not great.
Not great, because any sicknesses or genetic problems will simply get passed down from generation to generation. So that could also be it. Again, Poe never comes out and says that, but it's speculated a lot that Roderick and his sister might have had a romantic relationship.
Well, I'm glad we didn't watch a movie version of this, because we all know I wouldn't have been able to deal.
Have we watched a movie that's somewhat inspired by a house that's falling down and a brother and sister who might have, or who definitely do have a unsavory relationship?
Maybe just a little bit.
Yeah. I can't
Crimson
even remember what that movie's called. What?
Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak, definitely inspired in part by this story. I mean, as well as, Gothic stories in general.
Yeah.
Gothic stories were not like famous for shying away from like inappropriate relationships.
Yeah.
Women hiding up in a room in an old house. I do like what he says in the beginning. He's like, the house looks fine. He's like, it doesn't appear to be falling apart. Except for this one crack that goes from the very top right down to the very bottom, and right down the middle. Other than that, the house looks fine.
Boop.
If you could not see Willow, she put her hands together and popped them open Audrey 2 style, as if the house just sort of like collapsed one to either side like a Kinder egg full of horror.
If there's a giant crack in your house, maybe get that fixed.
Right. Unless it is a crack house, and then that's supposed to be there.
Unless you're Amy Pond.
Right. And that's going to be the basis for an entire season of television that will somewhat unsatisfactorily be resolved in the end. We call that a Stephen Moffat plot. So he reads, so after the sister dies, and he kind of mentions, Roderick is like, oh, by the way, my sister died last night. Yeah. And the narrator is like, oh. And we've only seen the sister like once. She just sort of wanders through the room.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, she's in a bad shape.
Yeah. Hey, at least she's not locked in the attic like a lot of heroines in Gothic stories.
At one point, Roderick's like, "Oh, but I do like to sing a song every now and then." And he picks up his guitar and he sings, or he plays he recites the Haunted Palace, which is a poem by Edgar Allan Poe from 1839. Fall of the House of Usher is also from 1839. And it is not a short poem.
No.
And it is about it is about a haunted house, basically. And it sort of parallels what's going on in the story. Just vaguely. It more sets a mood and shows you inside Roderick Usher's head, because he also paints like creepy paintings that are of like catacombs below the house. So there is this element of the story of like, is there something supernatural going on here? Because Usher also thinks that maybe the lichens and the fungi have a consciousness, like the house is actually a living entity, but that it's an entity formed of the entity, the consciousness of the plants. Like, it's really weird.
I have a question.
Why
don't they just move?
Well, because they are, I believe they make mention of the fact that they are what is called like the wealthy poor or something, like people who had a lot of money. Now they have no money, but they still kind of live in a huge house with servants because they just don't have anything else or anywhere else to go. And the servants are the family servants. So they're just sort of like hanging around. But yeah, like this family is, I believe they're destitute. Like they have
that would make sense.
Yeah. And they're sick. Where are you going to go when you're sick? And you're trapped in this house. I believe that like if they moved, like they would just die anyway. Like there is like that weird connection.
But at least they wouldn't die in the house.
From the house.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You seem to have died of house. Which is what happens. So
you seem to have died of gas that the house is exuding.
Right. You have a bad case of gas. Also house falling on you.
Also, you have a bad case of crushed to death.
Right. I've diagnosed you with crushed to death syndrome. So here's something interesting. Madeline dies, and he's like, I don't want, like you said, I don't want people digging her up to experiment on her, to study her. So we're gonna shut her in the family tomb for a couple of weeks. That way, I assume like the body will spoil and people won't want to dig her up anymore, because it's like fresh corpses they want.
Yeah.
And so they take her down, they seal her in the tomb. That's when he finally gets a look at them and is like, I think that these are twins. But also, and here's the thing, he's like, she still looks really healthy and her face is flushed and stuff. Interesting. But in the Wikipedia entry, it says, the narrator also notes that Madeline's body has rosy cheeks, which sometimes happens after death. But which sometimes happens after death is actually a hyperlink. And if you click on the hyperlink, it takes you to livor mortis, which is a second stage of death, causing red discoloration of the skin.
Yeah.
But on the page is just a photo of a dead body with livor mortis. The face is covered up, but it's on the slab and it has livor mortis. Like, it has the blood pooling. I was not expecting to see this when I clicked on it. There's a drawing of a dead body as well with livor mortis. And I gotta say, this guy is well equipped.
Oh my god.
I don't know why they insisted on drawing the ding dong that big. But someone was having a good time. So, yeah, so he's like...
Okay, there's a difference between rosy cheeks and livor mortis, though. We can agree, right?
I think someone just wanted to link to livor mortis.
Which sometimes happens after that. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, rosy cheeks. So then they just hang out together for a while, like for a week or so. And Roderick's becoming increasingly unhinged. One night, there's this massive thunderstorm. And Roderick's like, ooh, he's like going nuts. And the narrator's like, get away from the window, stop looking outside. Here, to calm your nerves, I'll read the first book I grab, The Mad Tryst. And this is a delightful passage because it's about like a knight or something, and there's like a dragon, and there's a fight with the dragon. But every time something happens in the story, it's like, and then my shield fell to the ground with a clang. Then like somewhere in the house, you'll hear like a clang.
Yeah.
And the narrator will be like, oh, that's weird. And he's like, and then I heard like a pounding at the walls. And then he's like, and then I heard what sounded like a pounding at the walls. Oh, well, goes on to read. And then the dragon screamed. And he's like, and wouldn't you know, I heard what sounded like a scream. And, well, it's the sister digging her way, or not digging her way, but like bashing her way out of her own coffin.
Yep.
And what's funny, though, is when she shows up, Roderick is like, yeah, I've been hearing my sister screaming inside her grave for a week now.
And we're like, why didn't you go get her?
Right. Because he has those heightened senses, so he can hear these things.
Yeah. Go get her then.
Yeah, like, why didn't you say anything? Which, of course, in like most adaptations of this story, they make it very clear that he intended for her to be buried alive.
Okay.
And like a lot of the adaptations of this will go out of their way to like sort of like retro, like fill you in on why this is happening. But yeah, so she shows up and she's covered in blood because she just clawed her way out of a coffin.
Yep.
Roderick's like, my sister! And then he dies.
Yeah.
And then the narrator runs out of the house and the house splits down the middle. Do the thing again. It literally does, though. It splits in half, sinks into the tarn.
She comes back, makes a lot of noise, and then falls down dead. Don't forget that part.
It's a big deal. So they weren't crushed to death by the house.
Does he fall down dead?
I thought he died.
And in her violent and now final death agonies, bore him to the floor a corpse. And oh yeah, okay.
So they died in each other's arms. The House of Usher dies. That's the end of the house. That's the end of the house. And our narrator's like, well, guess I'll just go home then.
Yep, guess I'll get the F out of here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get on my horse, which I hope is okay. And I'll just trot on back to the nearest inn. I would love a sequel to this. That was just about like the guy having to like testify and trial. Like, okay, so
here's what happened.
She screamed, the house fell down.
I mean, it would be a pretty easy thing to say. I went to visit my friend. His sister died. My friend buried her in the basement. I was trying to help him through the grief. Found out he actually buried her alive. And then I left the house, and I don't know what happens after that.
Oh yeah, because the house honestly also got struck by lightning.
Yeah.
So lightning struck the crack, which then split it. Amazing. It's just an amazing like visual. I was told the story of this. I was told the story of the fall of the House of Usher when I was in like junior high or elementary school. I had a teacher who really loved Poe, and so we like read part of The Raven and stuff. But we didn't read the story, but she explained what happened. And as a kid, and then when I read the story as like a teenager, I was like, I don't get it. I was like, I don't get why this is supposed to be scary. Like, is it scary just because the house fell down? Is that what's scary? Is it scary because she got buried alive? Like, that's not really scary. That's like unfortunate. Now I read it and I get the language and I get how weird and oppressive it is. And so I don't think it's a scary story, but it is like horrific. Like the whole thing is just like this just intense feeling of just like oncoming dread.
It's
from
gothic.
The first. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a gothic story. It's not overtly terrifying, but it scares you.
It makes you feel bad.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like Edgar Allan Poe was just like, I just want you to read this and just kind of feel bad.
Just like him.
Yeah. When did his wife die? Virginia Clem died at the age of 24. So she died in 1947.
Mm-hmm.
So nearly a decade after he wrote this story.
Yeah.
So it is clear.
So he wasn't even married at this point.
It is clear that, no, he obtained the license to marry in 1935.
Oh, okay. Wait.
Because remember, she was
13. But if she died when she was 24, a decade after writing this story. I'm mathing wrong.
No, because he didn't write the story until 39.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
They were married 11 years. He was already obsessed with like beautiful dying women. Like
he had a few problems.
But he loved dying women.
He had a few problems.
He did. Have I mentioned that he married a 13-year-old? So, yeah.
I take it that was significantly less common at the time.
He had to get permission. I mean, at least he had to get permission.
It's true.
Like, know all men by these presents that we, Edgar A. Poe and Thomas Welland, are held and firmly bound unto something, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, in the just and full sum of $150, to the payment whereof, well and truly to be made, to the said governor or his successors for the use of the said commonwealth, we bind ourselves and each of us, and each of our heirs, executors, and administrators, jointly and severally, firmly by these presents, sealed with our seals, and dated the 16th day of May, 1836. Whereas a marriage is shortly intended to be had and solemnized between the above bound Edgar A. Poe and Virginia E. Clem of the city of Richmond. And it is signed by the parents. So yeah. So it looks like they married in 1836.
Mm-hmm.
And then she died. She was found semi-conscious, in great distress, and in need of immediate assistance.
Wasn't Poe found the same way?
Oh wait, I'm sorry. That's the way Poe was found.
Yeah, I was like, hang on.
I'm looking at his. She was sick for a long time.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's
we
what
talked about this in the episode. Only one picture of her exists, and it was a painting made after her death.
Mm.
Only one painting. So I don't know why we keep talking about Virginia Clem.
Because she's an important woman.
She is an important woman, and she deserves to be remembered for more than just being a 13-year-old bride of Edgar Allan Poe. Mm-hmm. So this story, The Fall of the House of Usher, has been adapted a bazillion times.
A bazillion, you say?
A bazillion times. It's been adapted so many times that it has its own like section, like, in Wikipedia as just adaptation. So it was first adapted in 1928 twice, once in France and once in America. And the weird thing is the American adaptation was done by as an avant-garde experimental film. So if you get to see any of it, it's like weird and doesn't make any sense if you don't know the story. But yeah, directed by James Sibley Watson, who was just this like experimental filmmaker and did this weird adaptation of it. So two in 1928. The big one, the famous one, was 1960. There had been one in 1950, a British film, but in 1960, Roger Corman directed House of Usher, which was written by our friend Dick the Math Man.
Nice.
Richard Matheson wrote the screenplay, starred Vincent Price, Mark Damon, Myrna Fahey, the unfortunately very short-lived Myrna Fahey, and Vincent Price played Roderick Usher. And they alter the story quite a bit. I watched it the other day. The narrator is named Philip Winthrop, and he's coming to the house because he's engaged to Madeline Usher. They met once, like in Boston, and now he's coming to visit her. But they promise themselves to each other. It kind of follows the story but Roderick Usher's never met this guy, and he's like, you can't marry my sister. The family is cursed. We have to end the House of Usher now. The whole point is she can't leave the house. We can't reproduce because our line is cursed. But in their line is cursed because they were slave traders, a family of slave traders and thieves and murderers. And so he's like, everyone who's ever descended from our family will just become a horrible person to make the world a worse place. We're ending the line. The house itself is trying to kill them. Like chandeliers fall down, banisters fall. It's actually it's a beautiful looking film. It's a little, it pokes along in places, but it's actually a really well made motion picture. Vincent Price is great. And it ends just like the story. The house falls down and everyone except for the main guy die. And so there's no happy ending or anything. I recommend House of Usher. It's a fun movie. It was also adapted into The House of Usher in '89 with Oliver Reed and Donald Pleasance. And I watched a little bit of it on YouTube. It mostly involves two brothers, Roderick Usher and Walter Usher. It didn't make a lot of sense that I could figure out. There's The Fall of the Louse of Usher, which is directed by Ken Russell and includes an inflatable doll orgy. Doesn't seem to have much to do with the actual story. There's a movie called Descendant with I watched part of with Katherine Heigl and Jeremy London. It is. Ladies and gentlemen, look up Descendant 2003 film trailer. It's so bad. It is like watching, if you were making a movie set in 2003 about Hollywood and you were like, make the worst possible parody trailer of a 2003 movie based on an Edgar Allan Poe story, but have Edgar Allan Poe be a character in it. This is the movie for you. Yeah, because it's about this guy named Ethan Poe. Who becomes the main character in it doesn't make any sense. And it looks like it was shot on somebody's phone, but like somebody's phone in 2003. There's a movie called Usher, which I don't know anything about. And then there is a movie called House of Usher. There's a movie called The Bloodhound from 2020 that was filmed right before COVID. And it doesn't seem to have much to do with House of Usher, but it is based on the fall of the House of Usher. There's so many House of Usher adaptations. There's 4 operas based on it. And, of course, coming out this year, Mike Flanagan's The Fall of the House of Usher miniseries, his final project for Netflix.
Is he did what?
He did Haunting of Hill House.
That's what I figured, yeah.
Yeah, he did, all the greats.
So this will fit right in then.
Bruce Greenwood as Roderick Usher, Mary McDonnell as Madeline Usher, and Carl Lumley as C. Auguste Dupin, Edgar Allan Poe's detective character. So they are tying in other Edgar Allan Poe stories into this. And of course, the usual gang of idiots. We have Annabeth Gish, we have Henry Thomas, we have your usual Mike Flanagan, awesome collaborators. I'm looking forward to this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, hey, tying in the Poe-verse, I guess.
And I do love Bruce Greenwood as an actor. He played, I mean, a lot of people might, he's been in a billion things. A lot of people might know him as Captain Pike in the Star Trek reboot movies. I really like Bruce Greenwood. He replaced Frank Langella when Frank Langella was fired for inappropriate behavior on set. So, yes. Bruce Greenwood, we love it. So, follow the House of Usher. Thoughts on this story? Final thoughts?
Loved it. 10 out of 10. Wish I had read it for class when I was supposed to.
10 out of 10. When were you supposed to have read it?
I think high school.
High school?
It might have been my Gothic literature class in college, but I can't remember.
Well, I think you came to it when you were ready.
Yeah.
Because maybe you wouldn't have appreciated it then.
No, I don't appreciate most of the reading I do for school.
This was this. I was happy to revisit this, and I'm like, I'm gonna revisit this. Like, This isn't the last time I'm gonna read this short story. But I almost forgot to mention that there have been numerous books based on the fall of the House of Usher. Like here's a story from so-and-so's perspective. But if you're looking for an incredible retelling of it, last year's What Moves the Dead by Ursula Vernon, writing as T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher her T. Kingfisher novels are some of my absolute favorite recent horror books. She wrote The Twisted Ones, which is a retelling of I think The White People, and she rewrote The Hollow Places, which is inspired by Algernon Blackwood's The Willows. What Moves the Dead is the House of Usher, told from the perspective, it's also told from the perspective of the narrator, but it's a rewrite, it's a reimagining. It's delightful. It does some amazing world building. It's weird. It's creepy, and it's T. Kingfisher, so it's funny. This is just me shilling for T. Kingfisher because I think Ursula Vernon is an incredible writer. That's just my 2 cents. Read it.
Read it.
But read Usher first because you'll appreciate it more when you get the illusions. Mm-hmm. Anything else to add? I think we talked about Guillermo del Toro.
We did not.
Well, we said that one of his movies is loosely...
Yeah, we did. We haven't spoken about Guillermo del Toro in any of our other episodes. Why should we bother bringing him up now?
This is one of the easier stories to talk about him in because it's very obvious how stories like this influenced him.
He has Crimson Peak.
Yeah. And this is, of course, fine for the Medusa in the Shield because...
it's psychological.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's all about being... I mean, Gothic is all about being in somebody's mind palace, basically. The houses are all the brains of the characters around the narrator. Yeah.
And our editor, David Hartwell, mentions that prior to this story, Gothic horror usually was set in actual castles, and that House of Usher is a house, which was a little bit of a turning point in Gothic horror.
Yeah.
Brings it a little closer to home, I guess.
I do like the castles, though. I gotta admit. I like the castles. I like the imagery of the one lit window in the castle as the main character approaches.
Yeah.
I like it, okay?
He quotes Poe scholar Benjamin Franklin Fisher IV saying, "In Poe's work, a thing is never merely a thing, it is a language." And he says Poe's horror stories invent the language of horror, give meaning to the idea of the fantastic as a language. And we talked about that, just like this incredible language. It got me thinking, I was like, it's so ridiculous. People are talking about the movie Skinamarink right now because it just hit in theaters. I watched Skinamarink. I watched it at home. An amazing horror movie. I've never seen anything like it. It left me shocked and devastated. And it is long, and if you're not in the right mood for it, probably the most boring thing you'll ever have to sit through because almost nothing happens in it. You never see characters' faces. There's maybe 5 minutes of dialogue, and most of the movie is static shots of walls and corners of houses lit entirely by a flickering television set. It's a weird movie, but it got me thinking, and this got me thinking. I was like, we've read so many stories. We've watched so many movies, so many horror movies. Just what a useless categorization horror is.
Oh my, yeah.
Like, I don't even know what it means to be scared. Like, what does it even mean that if a story or a movie is scary? Does it mean that it makes you physically afraid? Does it make you uneasy? Does it mean it makes you afraid of the story, for the story, later on after the story? Like, I mean, what does it even mean?
Some of the movies I consider horror don't make me scared. They just make me angry.
Yeah. Some things are horror because simply they're about something horrific. Like, sometimes things are horror just because they have, like, a vampire in them. Like, The Lost Boys is considered a horror movie, but it's not scary.
Yeah.
And it's about super cool vampires who ride around on motorcycles. Like, what even is... I was thinking about... It was my shower thought yesterday. I'm just like, what even is horror? Because people are arguing about Skinamarink because people are like, this isn't even scary. This is boring. And so people are like, here comes that stupid conversation about, is it horror again? And I'm like, I don't think the question at this point is it horror? I think the question at this point is, what even is horror?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those, like, we created a classification for a genre that didn't have a standard set of rules, and now here we are, flooded with things that don't have standard sets of rules.
Like, Western is easy. A Western is set in the Old West.
Yep.
Like, that's it. You have to do that. Science fiction is a little more nebulous, but at least it, like, you have to, like, but horror is about a feeling.
Yeah.
Not about a genre convention. Like, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, it's easier. That's why there's so many subgenres, because it's easier to classify things into subgenres. But, like, is Gothic all horror? Or is Gothic something else sometimes?
And is all gothic horror? Yeah. Can you have, I guess you can have like a gothic comedy.
You could have a gothic romance. There's plenty of gothic romances.
Definitely a gothic romance. Can you have gothic science?
But are gothic romances still horror because they still have some horror elements?
Could you have gothic cyberpunk?
I feel like gothic cyberpunk would fall under horror though sometimes, because cyberpunk is one of those like
gothic cyberpunk.
Isn't cyberpunk loosely gothic anyways?
Oh, it's called cybergoth. Yeah. Never mind. Oh wait, no, that's a subculture, not a literary. Gothic cyberpunk fiction.
Genre.
Gothic cyberpunk science fiction in the work. Well, now it's just a bunch of people.
Cyberpunk is a genre of science fiction. So, I mean, you can probably mash anything together if you try hard enough.
I guess the point we're making is there's no such thing as genres.
Genres aren't real. Genres
aren't real. They're
just a category we use to make things work for our human brains.
Right. They're as useless as almost every taxonomy. So, thanks for joining us.
Yep, see you guys later.
What is the next story in?
We're going back to Stephen King.
Stankin' King, what are we doing?
We're going to read The Monkey.
The monkeys, here they come, walking down the street. They get the funniest looks of everyone they meet. Hey, they're the monkeys. I love them. Peter Tork, Mike Nesmith, Davy Jones.
Is this a reference to a band again?
Mickey Dolenz. I think Mickey Dolenz is the only surviving The Monkees. The Monkees. Hey, we're the monkeys. People say we monkey around. You're just looking at me like I'm an insane person.
Yeah.
The Monkees were a band that was put together in the 1960s for the purpose of television for a sitcom called The Monkees, about a band called The Monkees. They all played themselves. It was wacky comedy, very funny. They became popular in their own right. They had many hit songs. Take the last train to Clarksville. My Auntie Griselda. Then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer. A lot of hits. They reunited in the 80s. They have slowly died off over the years. The Monkees.
We're not talking about The Monkees.
No, we're talking about what?
Stephen King's The Monkey.
Stephen King's The Monkey. One of my, when I was a kid, favorite Stephen King stories. I've read it since then. It still romps and stomps. This is a great story.
We're gonna see if it is better to me than the Eye of the Dragon then. Which is still my favorite Stephen King story.
Oh, I see. I was like, we didn't read The Eye of the Dragon. It romps and stomps, The Monkey, and we'll also have to talk about the weird, illegally made film adaptation that doesn't credit Stephen King.
Cool.
But was featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
We should watch the Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode of that before we record.
It might be the only way you can see it. So, and it's only part of the episode, so it's a short film. We will definitely be doing that.
All right.
So until next time when we cover Stephen King's The Monkey from his short collection Skeleton Crew. I'm doing this for a reason. Yeah. Skeleton Crew.
I love Skeleton Crew.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And we'll see you when it's Del Toro time.